Hi guys, it's Miss Carrico here, and we are actually going to record the building of the build type called a lead screw, and it has a corkscrew type of build to it. I attempted to record during class, but we were having some technical difficulties with the internet and also just connecting through my phone to the Chromecast. So to make up for that, especially for Group B, you can watch the video to learn how to build this for your builds if you were to use them. After this build and after you do your blueprints tomorrow, we will be working on your actual first project, which is the Windmill Project, where you get to design and build and construct a windmill in a group. And we will be switching partners for that. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get a hold of me in the classroom or anything like that. We'll see if we need to hold a virtual meeting or not on Wednesday. Most likely we won't, but we'll cross the bridge when we get to it. I just gotta get my phone set up here. There we go. All right. So for this, the things that we need for that, we have some new parts that we haven't seen or used before. Before we were building on this faceplate, but now we're building down here on this. And for your assembly for the lead screw, now these are located over in the toolbox area with the parts where the gears and things are. I have reorganized that a little bit to make it easier to get hold of the various things, but we have several parts that we haven't seen before, and some, of course, that we have seen. For example, the handle. All right, so for this, the parts that we have to work with, we have the track. We have two different types of tracks over there. These are located in the red toolbox where we get our screwdrivers from. It's the unlabeled one. It's the seventh drawer rather, right below the pliers drawer. So make sure when you grab these that it's the correct one. We want the one where this piece slides right on. We have different sizes of these sliders here. We have the sliding part. This snaps right on and it just goes along the track. We have these gray pieces that attach here at the end. We have this where the axle will go through, and the little, we call them little ravioli noodle, these little noodles or little screws go through here, and they go through this hole. And we have three of those. Now we can put a longer lead screw drive in here, but just for today, we're going to keep it relatively short, just because of supplies for all the groups. So make sure you have everything located in your magnetic bowl so that it doesn't roll away, and we'll get started. So whenever we're working with these, no matter where you put it, you can put it up here on this faceplate, but we're going to do this from here so it's easier to see. The first order of business we need to do is we need to attach the track to where it needs to go. In order to do that, you do need to use relatively longer screws. I seem to be missing some, so if I disappear, that's why. Right, so we're using our longest screws that we have. We have been using relatively shorter ones, so we're going to be using the longest screws and then also the shortest screws that we have. So we're using the longer ones because we have to go through the plate and also this track as well. So we don't want it to drag either on that bottom part. So we're going to put one on one end here and here. Flip it over. And we're going to attach the jellyfish to that. So I'm just going to tack these on here because we're going to hold on to little jellies from the top, and we can tighten that down fully once we switch to the front. We'll flip it over just to double check where this needs to go, because I want to keep it straight, so I had to flip it over just so I can eyeball it a little easier. After this build, we will be tearing down these build plates so that we have access to all the materials for whenever you build your windmills. All right, so it's not going to go anywhere. I'm holding on to that jellyfish on the bottom and just tightening the screw. There we go. So it's not going to go anywhere. We're good to go. And we can start putting our gray pieces on. Now for these, we do need the longer screws again. We're going to flip those. We're going to use 2. You think only 1 would be enough, but if we only put 1 in there, it's able to actually turn and cause some issues. So with the longest screw, you can see that we just barely have enough space to get a jellyfish on there. And that is perfectly fine because that just means that nothing's going to drag. Always have concerns when we put screws in here that if it's too long that it's going to drag. Like this is perfectly even with that, so we don't have to worry about it. But otherwise, we need to make sure that we tighten those down. When you're installing these, I like to make sure that I have the rough piece down here like this. We're going to put 12 spaces in between just because of the amount of corkscrews that we have. And move it in. And then I believe we need to move it in by 2 in class today. So we should have 10 spaces on the track. These little squares in between the 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Oops. Put our true screws through here, holding on to it while flipping it over. We'll be able to put our jellyfish on. All right, still attaching. Then when we get done, we'll flip it around. We'll hold on to the jellyfish from the bottom and tighten those screws in. So I'm tightening it down. We don't want to do it too tight because we don't want to strip the screws, but we just want it to where it's not going to go anywhere. And because this is just a learn how to build it type build, we don't have to worry about wear and tear and things on the actual build plate. Okay, so for the next thing that we need to do, we need to attach this little train piece to the eyepiece, and this eyepiece is what rides on this and will move back and forth. In order to do that, you need to use the smallest screws because inside of here there are threads that these screws thread into. We don't want it to go past this depth because it would drag on the metal piece. So it would drag back and forth and then it would get stuck on these holes. So if you're ever building one of these and you notice it's dragging and it's nothing to do with the track itself, most likely you have a screw that is too long. So for this one, you could go in at an angle down through here, but if you go down through the top, which is up through the top of the holes here, you can just tighten it that way. It's just something that I've learned is easier to do instead of struggling to get that angle and get it tightened down. And again, because the threads are delicate in here, you're not going to want to overly tighten these because then it won't come off. And then we'll have some problems with that. So we are tightening it in place and it's not going to go anywhere. If you get that on there, you can just snap it down in place and it should move back and forth freely. So make sure that nothing gets caught. You always want to troubleshoot right after you do it, just so that you don't have to fix anything in the long run. because otherwise you get it all put together and then you realize, oh, it's catching. Well, then you have to take everything back apart, and that can be frustrating. The next things that we're going to work on here, now later we might have to pop this off, but I just wanted you to make sure that it's not going to drag or run on here. The next thing we need to do is that we have our longest axle, and then we have our little springs or little noodles. And if we look at these, you can see that there's two different ends to these. You have the one that has the little hook piece, and then you have the one with the holes. It's just like batteries. You don't want to put the two same size together. So this wouldn't work here. It would go like this. You need to find the hole that matches up with that end piece and snap it together in that hole. If you put it into the wrong space, your system will get caught because here, there's going to be spaces in between the gears, in between the little noodles and spirals. And those spaces lead your lead screw to actually jump around. So if we look at that, that is completely even. So once you line them up, you can slide it onto your axle. There's holes through here that you're sliding it through. And just work your way down through. Go one at a time. I found that if I did more than one at a time and I just held onto it like this and slid it on, it would lead to getting spaces or it getting uneven on here, and then it would jump. So I need to make sure that you check those springs for that. All right. So this is where it gets tricky. If it's narrow like this one, now if it's wider, you can get away with it to where you just slide it in through the hole here and it'll fit. I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but if you have issues, like you can see here, it's almost too short. I think we're good to go. Once you thread it, you're going to want to spin it to where the spirals will go through, lining it up in the center. Holding onto those springs, you want to put it through the same hole as what you did before, and then push it until the piece of the axle hangs over the plate, because we're going to put a handle on that, and you're not going to want to have the handle hitting down here. So we need to have enough space for you to handle that, but also while still making sure that we can lock this in place. In order to lock it in place, you do need to put a locking nut on the end. So you use the screwdriver without the ball tip and tighten it down. Remember, don't over tighten because these can easily become stripped. That was a problem we had last year, that people were just really making sure it wasn't going to go anywhere, and they made it pretty permanent. So if I was going through, I'm double checking to make sure nothing really moved out of the way. I'm also seeing if I need to move that any further. You can see this fell off the track. If I kept that there, I can see I have plenty of spiral for this section. So actually I'm going to actually untighten that and move it a hair. So we check it here. Good to go. And let's check it here, make sure we're good to go. You can see a little bit of that. Shoot. Now I gotta double check it again. Moved on me. Okay, so that one's on. And last check we're checking. I'm gonna tighten it as it keeps moving on us. Right, we're good to go. So this is tightened here, so it's not going to move this way, but we still need to put one on this side so that it doesn't slide out that way. By putting one on each side, we are able to ensure that it's not going to move anywhere. So then once you put that on there, you should be able to get that, the lead screw will actually start to work. All right, so it's moving back and forth based on its spin. Now we need to put our handle on. We're going to make this actually lock in place in class, just so you get the habit of locking your handles in place. When we did the gears before, we didn't worry about doing that because we were switching from driven to drive gear. So I didn't have you actually tighten them down. So here we go. We make sure that the handle misses. It just barely misses on this one. And then we put the locking nut on this side. Tightening it in place. And now, if we move this off the edge, we can spin the handle and the piece moves along that track. All right, so if we turned it this way, you'll be able to see it actually running. If we spin it this way, it moves down along and then goes back and forth. Now you can put this up vertically instead of horizontally. It'll still work. It just depends on what the goal is for the movement. Are you moving something up to another level, or are you just moving it across? And this would be good for something like a conveyor belt or something like that, to where if it spins, it moves it along. All right, so for this build, this is a little bit more advanced than the other builds that we had done before. And there are certainly other builds that we will need to explore, but we're going to accomplish those as we get to them, just so that you're able to actually get your builds in. And builds meaning we get to do your projects, because this one we're going to be doing for your windmill, and we'll see how much time we have. Then we will go on with the pool toy activity. But the builds that we have done previous, we have plenty of knowledge working with this in order to do it. Now I'm able to help you as well if you have any questions in class. Now tomorrow we're going to be drawing the blueprint for this. That'll be the last blueprint that we draw for parts reference for right now. And then when we get to it, like I said, we'll cross the bridge when we get to it. If we get to it, we get to it. If not, we're not going to worry about it. I want you guys to be able to do some creative activities that are a little bit more hands-on, and it's not just following a direction to do. So each one of these builds has a specific purpose, and as we do our windmill, you may use these, you may not. It just depends. And if you need help coming up with how exactly to go about something, just let me know in class. But thanks for tuning into the video so that you can catch up with that.